While walking with a friend in Kittery this past fall, we cut across the Rice Public Library parking lot. And as we turned the corner of the building, we found ourselves somewhat unexpectedly in the children's play area, the kind of place that you don't usually enter unless you have a small hand to hold or a reason to linger. And there, set low into the ground, was a water fountain built into a rock, a boulder really, solid and unassuming, the kind of stone that looks like it has endured more weather than memory and will likely still be there long after the rest of us have moved on. Now, it didn't form there naturally. It had been placed there intentionally to inspire play and create a foundation for the little ones to grow from. Carved into the stone were these words: "For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it." The words belong to Amanda Gorman, and they come from the closing line of her inaugural poem, "The Hill We Climb." Now, I have been thinking about that quote ever since that day. Now, it wasn't new to me, but somehow in a season of fading light, I needed that reminder, the quiet, stubborn insistence that the light remains. Now, it does not say the world is bright. It does not claim that light is obvious or even evenly distributed or easy to trust. It does not suggest that bravery comes naturally or that courage is something we can summon on demand. It simply insists that the light is there and that what is asked of us is not heroics or perfection, but courage, ordinary courage, the kind that keeps showing up again and again. That insistence feels very close to what Jesus is saying in the gospel today. You are the light of the world, he says. He doesn't say, try to be the light of the world. He doesn't say, work towards becoming the light of the world. He doesn't even say, someday, when you are wiser or braver or less tired, you will be the light of the world. He says plainly, and he says it in the present tense, you are the light of the world. I wonder what it must have felt like to be one of those gathered on the mountaintop that day and to hear that for the very first time. I wonder what it felt like to be named in that way, having done nothing to deserve it. You see, Jesus is not speaking to people who feel powerful or settled. He is not speaking to people who feel certain about what comes next. He is speaking to ordinary people, people who have been overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel invisible, people with responsibilities that they cannot set down, with worries that follow them home, with bodies that ache and minds that spin, with lives that are complicated and unfinished. And he does not hand them a plan or a program or a list of expectations either. He simply tells them what they are: light. And then he goes on to say, no one lights a lamp and puts it under a bushel basket, because Jesus knows us. He knows how easily we begin to dim ourselves. He knows how often we tell ourselves that now is not the right time, that the risks are too real, that we don't know enough, that we might say or do the wrong thing, that surely someone else, someone wiser, louder, and better equipped is going to step in. He knows how persuasive those stories become, especially when we are weary. And many of us are weary. Not disengaged, not indifferent, but worn thin by the sheer effort of paying attention. Worn thin by the accumulation of harm, by the relentlessness of bad news, by the sense that the needs are endless, the fractures deep, and the path forward is anything but clear. In moments like this, a quiet question can take shape in the heart, not shouted or dramatic, but persistent and reasonable. What difference could I possibly make? Especially when the world feels louder than it has ever been and harder to make sense of. But the prophet Isaiah speaks to this kind of despair rising. He turns our attention not to some distant solution or dramatic intervention, but to the work already within our reach. to repair, to feeding those who are hungry, to loosening what binds, to making room where there has been exclusion. He speaks about love that shows up close to the ground in ordinary bodies and ordinary days. Love that is practiced, not performed. This, Isaiah suggests, is how we keep watch. This is what it looks like to stay awake in the night. Now, repair, it does not create the light. It moves with it. It is how the light already present takes shape in the world and how our lives come into alignment with what God is already bringing into being. As we live this work of repair, Isaiah goes on to say, Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, not like lightning, not like a spotlight, but like the dawn. And here's what we know about the dawn. Dawn does not rush. It does not shout. It does not arrive all at once or demand immediate recognition. It comes slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. A soft shift in the sky, a thinning of the dark, until suddenly you realize that the world looks different than it had the night before. And here's the thing about dawn. It comes whether we are watching or not, but is only noticed by those who have learned how to stay. By those who have kept vigil through the night, not because they were anxious, but because they were hopeful, because the light they were waiting for mattered to them. We do not keep watch to make the dawn come. We keep watch because the dawn is what we have been waiting for. And so I wonder if what Jesus and Isaiah are really inviting us into is something simpler than we sometimes make it. I wonder if they are inviting us into a way of paying attention. A faith that stays awake not because it's anxious or on edge, but because it is hopeful. A way of living that learns to notice when the light begins to break, and we learn to move toward it when it does. Because light, when it is real, doesn't overwhelm or overpower. It doesn't force its way in. It simply helps us see. It helps us see one another more clearly, and it helps us see ourselves more truthfully. It doesn't show us everything all at once, but it does make the next step visible. And sometimes, most of the time, that is enough. Light gives flavor to what otherwise would go bland, and direction to what might otherwise be lost. It doesn't erase complexity or make the hard parts disappear, but it does keep us from walking blindly through them. And perhaps this is the gentlest and hardest part. Jesus does not ask us to become someone else. He asks us to stop hiding who we already are, to let our care be seen, to let our compassion take up space, and to let our faith have a body. What Jesus asks of us here is not that we take on everything or carry the weight of the world on our own. It is simply this: don't step away from the place where love is already asking something of you. The conversation that you have been postponing, the neighbor whose fear you have noticed but not named, the harm you can no longer pretend is abstract. Stay in that place. That is how the light learns to move. And that might look like staying close to someone who is really afraid, even when you don't have the right words. It might look like speaking the truth carefully, even when your voice shakes. It might look like refusing to look away from suffering that would be easier to ignore, or choosing tenderness in a world that rewards hardness. None of this requires perfection, but all of it requires presence. And presence, friends, is not nothing. Presence is how love becomes real. Presence is how light becomes visible. Presence is how a different way of being in the world begins to take shape, not as a reaction to chaos, but as a way of living we slowly grow into together. Not because the way is easy, but because the way is worth choosing. The world does not need more people who have everything figured out. It needs more people who are willing to remain human. People willing to practice love publicly. People willing to believe that light still matters, even now. Which brings us back to that stone in the playground. Words carved not for the powerful, but for the passing. For the children who will drink from that fountain, for the adults who will pause there distracted and thirsty, for anyone who needs something steady to return to. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. But the poet does not stop there. She adds one more line. If only we're brave enough to be it. Seeing the light is where hope begins. Being the light is how love takes shape, not all at once, not perfectly, but truly. May we never underestimate the light that we carry, and may we trust that even now, even here, it is more than enough. Amen.